All right, that's set up. Go ahead.
All right, so hello everybody. My name is Laura Wiper. I am the department chair in the Community Economic and Social Development Department at Algoma University. I've been at Algoma for 10 years, largely as a sessional faculty. I've been there full-time over the last 3 and have recently just landed a tenure track position, finally. Takes forever, but it's because we're small and these things don't come up very often. So that's given me a whole new perspective on all of these little types of projects that I've been doing, because for the last many years, I've only been able to do projects that were, 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, because I never knew from year to year what was going to be next. But now I'm starting to look at longer term projects. So that's exciting. But this was a short term project. It started in September, actually. And at first it was largely a preventative or proactive measure related to COVID, because what happens is in the winter semester, I often teach, it's called CESD 3017 directed studies. It's a 3rd year placement course where students spend half as much time in a classroom in a seminar setting, because instead for the other half of their time, they're out on placements for about 150 hours over the semester. But this year, out of the 23 students that we had projected to go into that winter term, we had 10 or 11 students who were international students. And with what was going on with COVID, although they were largely in Sault Ste. Marion area, a lot of the government visa centers were slowed right down. Some were stopped related to lockdowns in various countries. And we already knew from our international services folks at the university that work permits that usually take 180 to 200 days were, 6 months plus. So we were quite concerned that this is a required course for these students to graduate. A lot of them were in the 3-year degree. So this was one of their last courses. And so we had to start trying to figure out, what are we going to do if they don't get their work permits? And in the end, most of them didn't get them. So it's really good that we were flagged, but we had folks at the university watching out for these students, that they let us know, and then we could work preventatively with them. So because they couldn't work except for on campus, we had to figure out what we were going to do for these students. They wouldn't be able to work out in the community, but our campus was also locked down and had been since March. So how do we have on-campus placements for students when the campus is closed? So what we ended up doing is creative compliance, where they were tagged to a faculty member and doing research virtually online with that faculty member, and as such would be counted as on campus. And so we were able to find spots for about not quite half of these students with different faculty who were doing research, but we still had a group of 6 to 7 students who needed a placement. And although I was the course instructor for this this practicum course, I decided that I would take that on with these students. I have known many of them since their first term many years ago, and really felt commitment to them that we really had to figure this out. So we took on a group supervised placement for the first time ever, because usually it's one student with one supervisor out in one agency out in the community. So it was very different from how we had done it in the past. And so what I did is I developed a group project for them where they would be divided into smaller teams within the group. And each of these 3 teams is what I worked out within this practicum group would be responsible to, by the end of the term, come up with a video that really showcased historically, culturally relevant foods, talk about them in terms of the impact and the reasons why they're important, actually cook it and do a how-to video. So they're also showcasing its cross-cultural learning, which is important in any place, particularly with international students. We have to, support the diversity of all of our students and support their backgrounds. But at Algoma University, we have a special mission that is very particular. Chief Shinwalk historically set the site aside as a place of cross-cultural learning. So it really spoke to our special mission. And then as the fall moved on, we thought that we would do this with some other universities as well, if possible. We are part of the UArctic network, of course. So we had our experiential learning office and international office put calls out. We did get interest from a student who was working in a tourism course at the Savonia University in Finland, Savonia University of Applied Science. She had already been doing some food related projects. So we brought her in and we did a call out across the university in terms of other students who might be interested in extracurricular credit to be involved in this project, just to diversify the group, because we had 6 international students from India. And we wanted to make sure that although we really wanted to highlight that, we wanted to also have other dishes from other places. So in the end, we ended up with a few students who were Indigenous and Métis background. We ended up with a student who was from the Philippines originally. We ended up with a student from Finland who worked in parallel with us. And so what I did, and this is one I guess I'll share on my screen just for a minute, if I can here. Can you see that?
Yep, we can see the Google document.
Okay, so basically what I did is I just built out a work plan with these students, because some of them were in the class and some were not in the class and some were in other universities. So it was, how do we all work together? There's time zone issues in terms of the woman from Kirsi from Finland coming in during the time that we had our team meetings. So what happened is the students who weren't in the actual class paralleled us in terms of the work. So they followed the work plan. They did the same things on the same weeks in terms of starting to figure out what dish they're going to make, doing some of the background research on it, listing the cultural relevance of the dish, the ingredients, if you could find them in the city or not, who's going to do, because if they were working in groups, some worked individually, but largely these were group projects, who was going to do the recon at the grocery store in terms of how much everything costs and if you could actually get it in the community, who was going to do the research on the historical relevance, who was going to do the research on the cultural relevance of the ingredients, specific ingredients, who was going to write the scripts up, because part of this was, these are not marketing students, so you know, getting used to things like writing scripts out so that they know what they're going to say ahead of time, that I've proofed all and edited the work after they've, you know, presented their research to the group. These were all things week to week we had to really stay on task, so that by the time it came around time to start cooking and videoing, they would still have enough weeks to do editing at the end, because I knew it wasn't going to be you cook one week and you edit the next and you're done. Like, we needed many weeks just for the editing portion, because again, these students, you know, hadn't edited videos before. They haven't done this type of work. So I'm just going to change this up now to the LS. So here it is now, final project on our hub's site for projects. So thank you also, Rachel, for doing this work for us. But in the end, we ended up with 5 different videos, 2 that were based out of cultures in India. One, it was a group, 3 students were from Kerala and southern India. The other 3 students were from Punjab in northern India. We had the Carolina pies from Finland. We had adobo from the Philippines, and we had rice with berries in terms of the indigenous dish that is local to this particular area. After the videos were done in draft, they shared them to each other through their groups, and then we met even with Kirsi from Finland and had a sharing circle virtually, so they could talk to each other about the challenges, the things they thought they did well, ask each other about other things about cultural dishes, not just the dish that they had seen you know, in the video from other students. And that was a really interesting hour as well. I wish we actually would have done a little longer than an hour, because we certainly could have done a lot more sharing than we did at that point. And for some of these students who, you know, knowing them in their first year when they came in, very quiet, you know, sitting in the back of the class, not saying too much, to see them at this point at the end of their degree, doing videos and being really proud of these videos that they've done was a really nice full circle for me as an instructor, seeing them in one of their final courses and seeing those final papers in terms of the synthesis, where they understand not just the importance of food related to resiliency and community resiliency and environmental resiliency, but also how it relates to other community economic and social development principles that they have had woven through their courses across their degrees, and that they could reflect this back in those final papers where they're talking about, you know, asset-based development and respect for local knowledge and, you know, how we engage collectively and participate at a community level. These were things that for me were as important as the video itself. I've shared this video not just through the Lake Superior Labs Network and through the university, but also through Slow Food International and Slow Food Canada, because as a Slow Food Canada board member, I actually presented this same project at the Terra Madre regional event for Canada just in April, and was asked to be part of the International Education Committee related to this work. Because although it's, these kind of things seem like very small projects in some ways, in other ways the impact's really huge, and they're really important in terms of that ability to do that intergenerational knowledge transfer related to digital storytelling, being able to have these documentations of these processes. And you'll see if you've watched any of these videos, some of them talk about it. My mom said, so they were, although it wasn't primary research, they were talking to their families overseas as they were doing these projects and learning more themselves as they went along. So that's in a nutshell. I know I talked for probably 10 to 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop now. But I just wanted to share it today because it was a really exciting project. And although it was extra work for me because it was, above and beyond teaching this course, I just took on supervising. In the end, it ended up being 11 different students across various universities. It was worth the work. And it also dealt with an issue that came up for us very suddenly related to COVID that we had not expected in the first place. So it was important in terms of helping the students to complete their degrees as well. And I'll see if I can stop sharing. Thank you.
That was great. Thanks so much, Laura. What a great overview of how that worked. And as an international student, I always appreciate it when instructors put some work into helping that happen. So that was great. Gavin, we could do questions for Laura now. Gavin, if you still have computer stuff going on, or did you want to switch over?
Yeah, I think maybe it makes most sense to just do the presentations now, and then we have lots of free time for discussions afterwards. For some reason, my camera on the laptop here is not working today. So luckily, I did prepare a PowerPoint for this. Lindsay helped with that. So I'll share that screen now.
Yeah, that sounds good. And folks, in the meantime, if you've got immediate questions for Laura you don't want to lose in your mind, go ahead and put them in the chat or just make a note while Gavin's presenting, and we'll come back to them in a bit. Otherwise, go ahead, Gavin.
Yeah, so here's the title page here. The one thing I think is pretty cool is now we have that fourth hub down in Michigan, or in Minnesota, sorry. No, Wisconsin. Finally got it. So I just added that to the slide. I wanted to start today with, we tend to do a lot of land acknowledgements. I'd like to just offer a different term here, which is a place acknowledgement, which says that we're living in an age where there are new technologies that are changing what we think of time and space. And so something like video, right, oral storytelling, there's a rich tradition here that goes back hundreds of generations. Recording that, what are the questions that need to be considered here? And the little tree I have up there is it's a Celtic tree, and that's sort of coming into doing this work, right? There are a lot of questions around, who am I in terms of hearing these stories, and where do I come from? And this tree is there to link me back to my Celtic origins, because the Celts were an oral culture too. Storytelling was big. So that's where I wanted to start today, and I'll move from here. So this process of the sustainability stories started after the Thunder Bay Hub ran a labyrinth walk at I think it was maybe March or February last, right before COVID hit. And what we have here on the top left hand is some of the Living Labs members walking the labyrinth. After walking the labyrinth, everybody gathers in a circle and sort of reflects on what's the work we're involved in here, how to do this together. As Living Labs was just getting going at that time, it was a really rich session. And what I put on the other side of the screen here is actually from a book linking back to the tree on the last slide. It's called The Sacred Tree, and it talks about vision being this thing where you have a circle, a medicine wheel with these 4 different components, but we're constantly looking, we're constantly getting new vision. And that's at the top of the screen here. A circle is a line. And just like walking the labyrinth, right? It's I think so often the labyrinth is talked about as a non-linear process, but I would say it's actually a centering circular process that really has to do with vision. So what happened was maybe a month or 2 after this labyrinth walk, Lindsay Galway contacted me and with this idea of using digital storytelling because we'd gone into the COVID pandemic and we were looking at how to keep doing research through the summer, right? How to keep this hub rolling. So that was one of the first projects that Living Labs Network put together in the Thunder Bay Hub. So I'll jump right to the next slide, which outlines. So far, there's been 6 projects. I don't know if Sue's still on here, but her and I may be secretly working on a 7th. But just to really start with a high-level overview of the projects. So one of the projects starting here was the Lakehead Sustainability Walk. So that was a partnership with Lakehead University. Can see Jake up here and Summer at the Thunder Bay Energy Plant. That was with Earth Care Thunder Bay. Lakehead Wellness Path, again, so much of the visioning behind this started with the labyrinth, with that centering process, with how do we work across time as a group with vision where every voice is being heard. And the form of visual and audio storytelling just, I think, works so good where we're used to an academic space where it's a lot of thinking, but this was able to really dig down to the core. So the Little Lakes Great Lakes Water Project, that was with a number of organizations. Mike, who's here from the Experimental Lakes, Rob Stewart and the Remedial Action Plan, and then some citizen science that's taking off in Thunder Bay here. The other project with Roots to Harvest was seed saving and agroecology. And that's sort of done in partnership with Thunder Bay, and there's more info about that on the Living Labs network. And then the last project on this slide was partnership with Fort William First Nation. So really what this project seemed to do, the sustainability story series, was really look at kind of pretty much the whole picture of what's going on, like what's active in Thunder Bay region and how to connect that, right? And how to get that information out, because yeah, it's time to work together across these things, as I'll come to later in the brief presentation here. So backing up from the product, right, you can see those 6 videos on the website. What we realized while putting these together, I had a lot of meetings with Lindsay and Charles, and we really were able to go about it in a really interesting process. So I think typically when we look at interviewing, right, there's a list of questions, right? The person goes there and it's kind of, maybe it's open forum, but what happened was we sort of together, we brainstormed 3 groupings of questions. So the first was around, what is the story of this work you're doing? The second grouping of questions was around, how are relationships enabling this? How can relationships make this work even more better and relevant? And then third question, kind of the key Living Labs question, right, is what does this have to do with just sustainabilities? So through that process, I think it was about 18 interviews that summer I did. And I used the questions as kind of just a checklist. So I would start talking and I would make sure that, okay, yeah, this person has talked about the story, that talked about the relationship, but was really kind of more a space holding for people to examine and explore. Okay, what is the work I've been doing? How does it relate to other people's work in this community? And what does it have to do really at the watershed scale in terms of just sustainabilities? So that's a brief outline of the process. I used, so after that initial interview, I would edit it down, send the portion of each interview back to that person to see if we were able to capture well what they wanted to say. And then I think with the first project, the sustainability walk with Lita McKellar at Lakehead, there were something like 7 drafts. Other ones that kind of got tight near the end to finish this, but it was really, really good back and forth. And looking again, like that first slide of the labyrinth I showed, where there's a circle, but also the straight winding line where the vision is ever changing. The process was what really felt, I think, to those in the working group involved, they were what felt really important here. I'll move on to the next slide now. So backing up to just the kind of the overall context of what video or oral storytelling can do. I may have said this earlier, but I think so much of academics, so what we have here is a picture of the brain, how the brain interrelates and work. So much of academics and learning is about being in the cortex here, right? Which is where writing is a perfect form, right? Communicating with the community in order for stuff to land with impact, using visuals, actually hearing people talk, hearing how they express themselves, what hand movements they use, right? It's, I think, so much more relatable. That kind of brings this limbic system, the motion into the picture, so to speak. And then at the base of the brain here, the brainstem, what it also allows is many of the interviews ran for almost an hour long, and I was just holding space there with my checklist of questions. Yes, they've talked about this, this, and this. But what happened was that just created a safe container where people could really dig in and share about what they think just sustainability should be, right? What they think this work should be able to do, where there are tensions, where there are struggles. And then with the process of me editing down their interviews, sending it back to them giving the okay, then it going into further edits, there's a real safety involved with giving people the chance to speak their hearts, essentially. Move to the next slide. So I put, so of everybody involved in this video, there is only one person who is not a Living Labs member, and that's Gene Gijic, who we see on screen there. And he's the Lakehead elder in residence, and we invited him in as a part of the Lakehead Sustainability Walk, and it was one of the neatest interviews done, because in terms of creating a safe container, right? So I think Gene brought his coffee, and we talked for 30 minutes, and then he started to get upset, really talking about the structural issues that impede his people. He's from Gull Bay First Nation, and just how to be seen and heard. And it was really neat because Gene would get worked up and he'd stop for tea. But I just said, Gene, this is video, right? It's like, you say what you need to say, and we'll work together in terms of how this final project comes out. And then what's really neat that happened is Gene's on the website, the introduction to the whole sustainability series actually comes from Gene's grounded Anishinaabe view of what is sustainability, right? So he's both able to ask those justice questions, right? Well, what about justice and sustainability? But also to bring a worldview that is more like that moving line of vision that I showed in the opening slide with the labyrinth. So something that really supported this whole process too, as I've mentioned a little bit, Lindsay and Charles were amazing. And then we had a working group, a smaller, I think there were 5 or 6 of us in this working group, where we met kind of, I think it ended up being about monthly to just talk about the rounded vision of this. And what's neat is what started to come out, or what started to stew in that working group, was how, okay, well, this past year during COVID, the sustainability stories was awesome, right? Really resources people, really makes us feel, I think, as a community, like there's work being done that's really, really quite good, and we can start to link this together. Like I said, though, Gene was the only person I interviewed who was outside of the Living Labs network. And so as the 2 lines of text I have up here, right? So the sustainability story series was the network linking out to the community, right? Living Lab sharing what its identity is, what the work it's involved in. And Charles, a couple people and I have talked about a potential justice series that I would view as needing to do the reverse of what the sustainability stories went, where I was editing a lot of stuff, the working group, like we were internally making decisions about what is our view of sustainability. Is there the opportunity to flip that the other way around and have the community really inform what our network responds to and where we act? So that was a neat thing that came out of there. And then I just have a few more slides here. Because what happened, so there's a few places these videos have gone now. They're hosted on the website. We presented at Research and Innovation Week. And it was really funny because right in the middle of that presentation, Lindsay got the notification that the field school funding had come through. So it was a neat bit of excitement. But it's cool because before that presentation, we had a small meeting where we really asked, like, okay, what are we trying to do? Almost, right? So I have the what, why, and how here, because there's this wonderful medium we can use, right? There's all kinds of social stuff to navigate. There's an opportunity to take this out of the academic arena and bring it into the community arena. And after that Research and Innovation Week presentation, Shaw Spotlight got in contact, and 4 of the videos now are hosted on their local network, and there's been talks about partnering with the Thunder Bay Library to do a showing of some of the other videos. So this is still ongoing, but it was really neat because so this video series got finished, and then I welcomed a daughter into the world, and all this work had just been done, and then there's a lot of time for me to reflect and just look at asking, well, what, why, and how in terms of Living Labs. And what I'm going to share really briefly is just 4 slides here on what's come to me, because I think so much of what I did was listen to people and really try to hear their story. And after my daughter Ira was born, I was like, wow, I have a story here too, and I would like to share this with you all. So the first thing is, it feels to me like this kind of community outreach through visual or oral storytelling is really about awareness. And I think I have 11 up there because I think 11 is in terms of how things aggregate, how things accumulate, right? If you can get 11% of a population aware about something, it snowballs from there. So if 11% of Thunder Bay knows about some of the work Living Labs is doing, right, a heck of a lot more of Thunder Bay relationally knows about it. So that's kind of in my that's what's come to me in terms of the aim of this work. And it's not just the videos, right? It's all kinds of storytelling we do, but this is just one attempt we started this year. With my daughter Ira being born, right, I realized that, okay, we talk about sustainability, but we don't talk very long term, right? I think the Thunder Bay Energy Plan talks about 2050, which is awesome, but the 22nd century will be within my daughter's lifetime, and I haven't heard that term used anywhere. So it's funny. So that came through, and the Great Lakes work, right? It's like, okay, here's 20% of the world's fresh water, which has a huge impact on what not only our species but all species, the well-being of us in the future. So Living Labs, I think, can look that big as a mandate, right? The vision can look that far, and it is that important. I think, I don't know if Sue's gone or not, but she says, yeah, it's one of the most important jobs on the planet right now is to protect this fresh water. Moving to the next slide, which is just the question, like, what do we think what would it take, right, to protect? Well, the tipping point in most democracies is when you get around 33% of people, when you get a third of a community engaged. Yeah, Todd Dufresne, who is professor of philosophy here at Lakehead, wrote a book called The Democracy of Suffering on Climate Change in the Anthropocene. And his big line in that book was, okay, there are just going to be people who won't care, right? So it's time to stop caring about those who don't care and to work with those that do care, because there are enough hands. And it's just about how to gather those hands together. And there's really, really neat projects. I mean, the Climate Action Field School coming up, the Climate Action Park, where I think the vision is going this big, right? We're almost joking with on the last meeting for the Climate Action Park. It's like old school volunteerism, like let's get people to show up with shovels and plant trees. And that, as a kid, for me anyway, that's how I learned about so much of this this other than human world, and working together with other humans to really embrace it and be a part of it. And yeah, so the last there's one more after this, but the last slide is, okay, now there's as Lindsay often says, there's 4 hubs, there's 4 compass points around the lake now this, and the Climate Action Field School, I think, will be an awesome first cross hub project on a big scale. So I'm interested to see what will be orchestrated there, and excited to whatever part of it I can be. And I think we all are here in this room. And the last thing I wanted to share today is just this kind of idea, vision that came through to me. And I think it has to do with having a kid now and trying to figure out, like, how am I gonna go about explaining all this complicated stuff to kids? And I think that's something where Living Labs, right, really simplistically needs to be able to explain, okay, this is our identity, this is what we're doing, this is our mission, this is our goal. And this is the last slide I'll share today, and it's a slide of an orchestra. And so I think we all intuitively understand what it is to be playing our own part, whether that's string, woodwind, brass, percussion, whether that's thunder bass, Sault Ste. Marie, Duluth, or Howden, right? Yeah, there's the intuitive, live, playful sense there that we're working together here, and this needs to be orchestrated in such a way that we're on the same tune, right, with the same conductor. So that's where I wanted to end the presentation today. Thanks for all your time, and look forward to discussions after this.
Thanks, Gavin. That was great. Sorry, I'm trying to get all of my pins and unpins here on Zoom. Okay, so we have a question in the chat that Charles added, and we can get to that at the end, but I wanted to open it up now for folks to ask questions of either Laura or Gavin. We usually try to end about 5 minutes before the hour, so we have up to 20 minutes to chat about either projects or both. Gavin and Laura, you can ask each other questions, so go ahead and unmute or add to the chat. I have a couple for both of you, so I'll ask one of Gavin to get it started, and then we'll keep going. Gavin, I think previously you had told me the 11% number and the 33% number. Those came from a book or an article. Can you remind me where those numbers came from?
Yeah, it's a mathematic rule. I'm forgetting. It's either accumulation or aggregation or something. So 11, it's exponential growth is what it is essentially, right? So if 11% of the population can be aware, right, that very quickly gets up to 33, and then the action of those individuals, right? There's never going to be 100% participation, right? 33, I think, is all that communities really need in terms of having an active voice and vision. So yeah, I'll go back in I've done so much reading on this master that I'll go back and try to find that for you, Rachel.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, if you do, great, and if not, no worries. Thanks, I appreciate that. Laura, or Ryan, I see you on mute. Go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, these are both great. Thank you so much for sharing. One of the things I was thinking, Gavin, about your sustainability stories. I've been interested in Duluth about having something similar, maybe focusing on businesses or just kind of different notable sustainability highlights of the Duluth area, and then having some sort of either scavenger hunt through like Goose Chase or Action Bound where people can go to a place and that's where they get to view the video. Have you done, I'm curious, I think for both of you, I think the video stuff has been great, but I also been thinking about like what sort of hybrid ways to get people to interact with our communities too, and even like a QRL code at some of these locations where some of these videos are taken and where the story could take that, like a walking tour. And I think so, yeah, just sustainability walk. Have you looked at doing anything hybrid with your video stuff?
Yeah, Laura, do you want to go for this question, or I can jump in too?
I think it's a great next step for me when I talked about now being able to do longer term projects. Right now, it's only gone out through different types of networks and newsletters as links. But now that I can sort of, this is like a pilot for me because it was like we have a problem, let's try to sort out this problem, is how it really came into being. But now that I, can have that longer term lens, it's like, okay, how can I develop these kind of projects in the future in ways, like you're saying, that are more interactive? And Nordic Institute that I am an associate with, they do some of that type of work related to the local hub. It's a walkway around town that has like little info stops. So you could, where certain wild foods are growing, you certainly could have videos attached there. So it's part of the next steps for me in terms of what kind of future projects I can develop now that I've started thinking about these.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, and Ryan, I was going to jump in. This is where my head has been the last couple months, right? It's I think it's such an exciting time. I think we're seeing with COVID that just like Zoom and linear videos, right? They get pretty boring pretty fast. Mm-hmm. And so the Climate Action Park in Thunder Bay going on campus, we've been exploring ideas like this. So that's ongoing. But what I wanted to actually share was really neat. I'm headed up to North Spirit Lake next week, and they have a project up there where there's lots of mining claims in the area. And as of March of this year, all mining claims went online due to COVID. So prospectors no longer have to put a stake in the ground. So like areas of cultural sensitivity that the community was looking at protecting for 10 years, right, getting a plan, it's just done right now. So what we're doing is actually we're taking video and we're going to start geocaching stuff along with that video on the territory so that North Spirit Lake can say, hey, like we know this is our land, right? And that that online mining claim, right, is it comes from another time, right? And that's where I actually wanted to start my presentation with the place acknowledgement, right? Because I think we live with a foot in both worlds right now. And how are those worlds colliding, right? That's something that's not super explored, at least in an academic space. I haven't seen it yet. So really, really good question. And I would connect with you on any time about that if you're interested.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And as you both are talking, I'm thinking about how other people, if we have certain locations that we can collect or, gather more stories from people that we might not connect with our own networks. If there's opportunities. I think we tried Flipgrid, just other ways to get people to be able to share, share the stories of the place and their relationship to the place and the humans and more than humans in the area too about that. Yeah, there's some fun stuff to think about.
Yeah, and just that 33% number I put up there, right? What if 33% of people could know about this and could actually add stories themselves, right? In terms of protecting the lake from private interests, from whatever is going to come of that 20% of fresh water, right? I think it's something that should seriously be thought about in the near future.
Hey, yeah, hi everybody. So just turned on, but so this work is so fantastic. Thank you for the presentations. And Gavin, I thought, did you present yesterday? Was it yesterday? No, last week at some of your videos were part of something else. you had some recent just footage. I don't know if it was completely integrated yet. Oh, it was for the water stewardship thing that Nairn University was running. Am I right? You were
Yep.
on that?
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, and that's that's a really neat, really neat, really neat thing there too, right? Just looking at really thinking about the watershed scale and what we are being called to do, right, in terms of awareness and advocacy. So
Yeah, so this is so interesting, and I'm a call out to Ryan, my Duluth Hub colleague. Hi, Ryan. So, Gavin, I was just really interested in how you frame this, like at the university as well. One thing we're thinking of is a collaboration with journalism and in storytelling, and again, Ryan, something we could maybe do together, that has to do with these kinds of really interesting issues of place in our watershed, where things that have become hard to steward because of how some of the legal aspects are going online. And there's some really urgent issues that as you just described with mining too. So this is good for investigative journalism, as it is for, storytelling, as the basis for how we start looking at. I'm just wondering, Gavin, so you're training, it almost sounds to me, you're an anthropologist, am I right?
My undergrad was in Indigenous Learning and Philosophy, and then I'm doing a Master's of Education, sort of specializing in Indigenous education now.
Okay.
I love writing and video. I've been doing those things. They're play, right? It's all my life.
Great. You're the quintessential person that is transdisciplinary, in other words. And sometimes, I don't know about Ryan, but some of it, we have to locate ourselves in the university across disciplines. And, we want our students to be able to work the way you are. Gavin is kind of a goal here, and that we can create projects that allow that. And so I'm just wondering what other fields did you engage with that maybe we could bring into this network here in Duluth, where there is some, storytelling, digital storytelling, and other skills that we can engage both like at Scholastica and at UMD. That makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think what I would just say is I think millennials are super untapped. And I know Rachel and I have had this conversation a couple times before, right? Millennials grew up with a foot both pre-computers in the physical world, and then came of age with this technology. So I think any way you can turn sort of like Laura's project's perfect example, right? Anyway, the information can just be turned over to people who are digital natives and remember the physical world in a really real sense. That I think is that quite simply I would say is the millennials are untapped right now. And I think more and more millennials will move into leadership positions, and that will probably simplify everyone's job, because then, right, these artificial barriers we put up at institutions kind of see that, okay, they're not really relevant to, like you're saying, within investigative journalism, to actually figuring out what is the story, what's going on here, right? Because watersheds are fluid, right? So much is moving all the time, and we need a lot of eyes and ears.
So I'm going to flip this based on what you just said, Gavin, and ask what I wonder how the Living Labs network and the way you've been working is going to be useful to journalism. So we can bring them in. I think that they're going to learn from the way that what you've just said. Our students are digital natives. They have skills. And so anyways, maybe it's not even a question. I just am really inspired by your work and what you've done and how you're using the concept of Living Labs. And
well, Catherine, I'd really just briefly respond to that with the last slide, right? For Living Labs to have an identity and go out to news media, right? it needs to be like explainable to children. What is Living Labs Network, right? So this idea of it's an orchestra around the lake, right? Playing together, right? Putting together this this beautiful melody of what the other than human world has to offer us, and how we're stewards of that, right? That's, yeah, I'd say that. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Gavin.
Great, thanks. Naren, I see your hand is up. Would you like to chime in?
Yeah, thanks so much. I missed the first Laura's section, but I'll catch up with her. And thanks so much, Gavin. I really, I saw you on the water stewardship panel, so seeing you again is really, really great. I just wanted to follow up on that, actually, that point, because part of the climate action, so when I was engaging with, there was the media, it seemed to be quite a bit of media interest in the climate action. And I'm the beneficiary of all of Charles and Lindsay's hard work here and getting requests. But one thing I was saying to them was, come back during the climate action field school to see what we're actually doing, because I can talk about the funding release, but it would be really important for you to come to see what happens, and engage with the youth. So I did bring that up, but I think we should think through that a bit more, because I think that could be an important impact of the field school, is if we are able to communicate with the media about it, or maybe get them involved somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're brainstorming some of the ways that can happen right now, for sure. And do we create our own media to be released, and do we invite others to attend and make recordings for their own? Yeah, good question. I think that's something I'm swirling those questions right now. Thanks. Gavin, did you, or Laura, did either of you have interest in responding to that?
I think it just goes along with a lot of the conversations Darren and I have already been having around things like the expansion of the garden on the campus, some of the protocols around land-based protocols around that, and that at all moments, there are teachable moments, and that the more we can document those things as they happen, the more widely we can distribute them and disseminate them as well. So I think that videography, digital storytelling, of all of these things we do are really important ways to not just document it for ourselves, but in terms of outreach. So when people miss events, they can come back to it. There are ways to still be a part of it.
Yeah, and I just sort of echo Laura. I think that you hit the nail on the head there. I think something really, I think critical for Living Labs Network is how to be informed by the community, right? So one of the slides there that I put up, right, was, okay, sustainability stories was everybody but Jean, right? It was network members trying to link their work out, how to now invite the community in, and are these millennials that are coming for the field school, like, is that the opportunity, working across 4 hubs like an orchestra for it? So yeah, I think many exciting things to come.
Great. I am gonna ask this question that Charles posed to Laura, because I'm also curious in the answer. Charles had said, I'm interested in ways that your teaching in place with specific foods connects to people, places, and issues beyond where you teach. You touched on this with some of the connections discussed in your presentation, but would love to hear more about how you conceived of these connections and ways to enhance them. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So the work I do, or the work that I did in this particular project is foundational in the way that I teach. I teach all of the intro classes in community development. And so what that means is I'm teaching the students in their first and second semesters around issues of decolonization and what has development meant as part of the colonial project, and continues to be as part of the colonial project, and how we all need to decolonize, that we've all been colonized, and we've all been colonized in different ways. Because sometimes what ends up happening in some of these classes is there becomes this binary indigenous settler, and you've either lost or you haven't lost, and all of these sort of deficit lens ideologies around hidden losses and colonization. So I do a lot of work with the students around trying to get all students to understand how they've been colonized, and students will do projects related to their own hidden losses. So looking at an article from Turner et al., Invisibility to Transparency, that talks about hidden losses here in Canada for Indigenous people. You know, that's a reading that I gave in one of these intro classes, but then an assignment related to that is the students have to track out hidden losses within their ancestry. And so it gets students right in their first semesters understanding that this idea of colonization is something that has affected us all drastically. And I talk about how, you know, English isn't my ancestors' first language either, and not to in any way take away from decolonizing here in Canada, but to bring everybody into that conversation, and so that they can understand their differences. Actually, there's lots of similarities in terms of what's happening or has happened. When I have a lot of international students, particularly students from India or from some African countries, the minute we change this lens in this way, they get it. They're bringing in, you know, examples from their past, from their families, and it changes the entire dynamic in the classroom in terms of where we move from there. And so when I do any kind of project, and this is an example of that, it's not about one way. It's not about centering on whiteness. It's centering on everyone else, and the common ground that we all share in this project that we have to keep chipping away at. And so I don't know if that really answers the question, but for me, that's the answer, because it frames everything I do, actually, in terms of my approach and the lenses that I use.
That's great. I would love to like see your prompts and do that activity myself. I think that would be very super helpful. Great, thanks for that. Well, folks, we have 4 minutes left, but people have been leaving us as they need to, which is fine. So I think we can call it here for today. I think that's great. Thanks so much for being here. If you want to connect with Laura or Gavin and you don't have their direct email, you know, ask me and I can pass that on and people can continue conversations. But otherwise, thanks for being here. Enjoy the heat.
Thanks, everyone.